Let me tell you something about fear that no one else will say plainly. Fear is not a flaw in your design. It is a weapon pointed at you by nature, by society, by every person who benefits from your hesitation. And you have been carrying it willingly, thinking it protects you. It does not. It only protects the order that wants you controlled. The powerful do not eliminate fear, they redirect it. They understand that fear is simply information, a signal that can be interpreted or ignored based on strategic value. But you have been taught to obey it like scripture. Every time your pulse quickens before a difficult conversation, every time your stomach tightens before taking a risk, you stop, you retreat, you rationalize. And in that moment, you hand your power to the invisible architects who designed this response in you. Machiavelli observed princes who ruled nations, and he noticed something crucial. The ones who hesitated died. The ones who acted even imperfectly survived. He did not write about courage, he wrote about calculation. He wrote about the cold assessment of risk versus reward and the willingness to move while others debated. That is what separates the sovereign from the subject, not bravery, decisiveness. And decisiveness requires you to treat fear not as a master, but as bad data. You would not obey a map that leads you off a cliff. So why do you obey an emotion that leads you into stagnation? Here is the truth you must internalize. Fear exists to keep the species alive, not to make you powerful. It is an ancient system built for a world where hesitation meant survival, but you do not live in that world anymore. You live in a world where hesitation means you are outmaneuvered, outpaced, and forgotten. The lions are no longer in the grass. They are in boardrooms, in relationships, in negotiations, and they do not wait for you to feel ready. They strike while you deliberate. So the first principle is this: acknowledge that fear is obsolete in most of your modern battles. It activates for situations that no longer exist. It screams danger when you are simply uncomfortable, and discomfort, not danger, is where all expansion happens. Now let us go deeper. Anxiety is fear's cousin, but it operates differently. Fear is specific. Anxiety is the fog. It does not point to a threat, it clouds everything. It makes you feel hunted without knowing the hunter. And this is by design. Anxiety keeps you scanning, searching, unable to rest. It is the perfect tool for control because it never resolves. You cannot fight fog, but you can refuse to live in it. The Machiavellian approach to anxiety is not to cure it with comfort. Comfort is the drug they give you to keep you passive. The approach is to weaponize clarity. Anxiety thrives in ambiguity, so you must become a person who demands precision, even from your own mind. When anxiety whispers that something is wrong, you do not spiral. You interrogate. What specifically is wrong? What evidence supports this? What action reduces the variable? This is not therapy. This is tactical thinking. Most people treat their emotions like gods. They build altars to feelings and sacrifice their potential on them. But you must treat emotions like servants, useful when directed, destructive when obeyed. When fear says do not speak, you assess. Is there genuine danger or is there only discomfort? When anxiety says everything is falling apart, you ask, what are the facts? Strip the emotion from the data. This is what rulers do. They separate signal from noise. They do not act on how they feel. They act on what advances their position. And this is where the permanent elimination begins. Not by removing fear, but by removing its authority. You see, most advice tells you to face your fears. That is incomplete. Facing fear without strategy is just exposure. It might desensitize you, but it does not make you powerful. The Machiavellian method is different. You face fear with a plan. You enter the situation not to conquer the feeling, but to extract value. You speak in the meeting not to prove you are brave, but to position yourself as essential. You take the risk not to overcome anxiety, but to gain leverage. The emotion becomes irrelevant because your focus is on the outcome. This shift in intent changes everything. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are using yourself. Let me give you an example. Imagine you must negotiate with someone who intimidates you. The common approach is to hype yourself up, to try to feel confident. That is a losing game because feelings are unreliable. The Machiavellian approach is to study the person. What do they want? What do they fear? What information do they lack? You enter the room not as someone trying to overcome fear, but as someone holding cards they do not see. Your focus is not internal, it is external. And when your attention is on their weaknesses, your own fear has nowhere to grow. This is the art of redirection. You do not fight the fear. You starve it by feeding your strategy. Now let us address the body, because fear is not just mental. It lives in your chest, your throat, your hands. It hijacks your physiology and convinces you that the sensation is truth. But sensation is not truth. It is simply chemistry. And chemistry can be controlled. The ancients understood this. The Spartans trained their bodies to endure pain so that fear could not use discomfort as leverage. They knew that a man who cannot tolerate cold, hunger, or exhaustion is a man who will break under pressure. So they built tolerance, not to suffer but to rule. You must do the same. Teach your body that discomfort is not danger. Cold showers, fasting, physical strain, these are not punishments, they are recalibrations. Every time you endure something unpleasant by choice, you send a message to your nervous system. You are not in control. I am. This is why discipline is not optional. Discipline is the framework that holds your sovereignty in place. Without it, you are at the mercy of impulse, of mood, of fear. With it, you are predictable to yourself, and predictability is power. When you know you will act regardless of how you feel, fear loses its final card. It can no longer threaten you with discomfort, because discomfort is now your training ground. You have made it familiar, and the familiar cannot terrorize you. This is the principle of exposure, but sharpened. You do not expose yourself randomly. You expose yourself strategically, in controlled increments, always with intent. You are not trying to become numb. You are trying to become fluent in discomfort. And fluency means you can operate inside it without hesitation. Here is another layer. Fear is often social. It is not the act itself that terrifies you. It is the judgment that might follow, the rejection, the humiliation. This is where most people are enslaved. They do not fear failure. They fear being seen failing. And so they never act. They protect their image at the cost of their progress. But the Machiavellian knows something crucial. Reputation is built through action, not through hiding. The prince who never risks is not seen as careful. He is seen as weak, and weakness invites attack. So you must reframe judgment. Other people's opinions are not verdicts. They are simply noise, and noise does not determine your value. Your results do. Your positioning does. Your ability to maneuver does. When you stop seeking approval and start seeking advantage, fear of judgment dissolves. Because you are no longer playing their game. You are playing yours. Let me be direct. You will never eliminate fear by thinking about it. You eliminate it by becoming someone for whom fear is irrelevant. And that transformation happens through repetition. Every time you act despite fear, you carve a new pathway in your brain. Every time you choose strategy over comfort, you reinforce your sovereignty. The mind learns from behavior, not from intention, so your job is not to feel different. Your job is to behave different, consistently, relentlessly, without negotiation. This is how identity shifts. You do not wait to become fearless. You act as though you already are. And over time, the performance becomes the reality. Now let us talk about the internal dialogue, because this is where most battles are lost. You have a voice in your head that narrates your life. And for most people, that voice is a traitor. It predicts failure. It magnifies risk. It replays past mistakes and projects them into the future. This voice is not you. It is a pattern, a habit, and habits can be rewritten. The Machiavellian does not argue with this voice. He replaces it. When the voice says you are not ready, you do not debate. You say, readiness is irrelevant, execution is everything. When it says this will fail, you respond, failure is data, hesitation is death. You are not trying to silence the voice. You are installing a new script, one that serves power, not fear. This requires vigilance. You must become aware of your internal propaganda. Every thought is a suggestion, and you get to choose which suggestions you act on. Most people do not choose. They simply obey the loudest voice. But you are not most people. You are someone who understands that the mind is a tool, not a truth teller, and tools must be sharpened, directed, controlled. So when fear begins its familiar speech, you interrupt, not with positivity. With precision, you ask, is this thought useful? Does it advance my position? If not, it is discarded, not suppressed, discarded, like bad intelligence, because that is what it is. Bad intelligence from an outdated system trying to protect you from threats that no longer exist. Let me give you a framework. Every time you feel fear or anxiety rising, pause, do not react, assess, ask yourself 3 questions. What is the actual risk? What is the potential gain? What is the cost of inaction? This is not overthinking. This is strategic evaluation. And once you have the answers, you move, not when you feel ready, not when the fear subsides. You move because the calculation supports it. This is how generals operate. They do not wait for certainty. They act on probability, and probability favors those who move first. So you train yourself to act on assessment, not on emotion. And over time, this becomes automatic. You stop feeling the fear as a barrier. You feel it as a signal that you are near something valuable. Because fear always clusters around growth. It guards the edges of your comfort zone like a sentry. And every time you cross that line, you expand your territory. Here is what most people will never tell you, what they either do not understand themselves or are too afraid to admit. The powerful, the truly formidable individuals who shape reality according to their will are not less afraid than you are. They are not blessed with some genetic immunity to fear. They are not born with nerves of steel or an absence of doubt. They feel everything you feel. The trembling, the second-guessing, the voice that whispers all the reasons why they should retreat. They experience all of it. But here is the critical difference, the one thing that separates them from the masses who remain frozen in perpetual hesitation. They are simply more committed to their objectives than to their comfort. They have made a decision, a conscious, deliberate, irrevocable decision, that their goals matter more than their feelings. And that decision, that singular priority, that unwavering commitment to what they are building rather than what they are feeling, changes absolutely everything. It rewrites the entire equation of their existence. It is not about being fearless. Let me be crystal clear about this, because the myth of fearlessness has destroyed more potential than almost any other lie we tell ourselves. It is not about achieving some Zen-like state where fear cannot touch you. It is about being ruthless, absolutely ruthless, with your own excuses. It is about recognizing the voice of limitation for what it is and refusing to grant it authority over your actions. When you decide that your mission is non-negotiable, when you establish that your purpose is not up for debate based on how you feel in any given moment, fear becomes nothing more than a minor inconvenience. It is still there. The sensation has not vanished. The nervousness, the uncertainty, the discomfort, all of it remains present. You just stop listening to it. You stop treating it as though it has veto power over your decisions. Because you have something more important to attend to. You have a vision that demands your energy, objectives that require your focus, and a version of yourself that you are committed to becoming regardless of the emotional weather patterns that pass through your nervous system. This is the fundamental shift from reactive to sovereign, and understanding this distinction is absolutely critical. Reactive people are controlled by how they feel. Their actions are downstream from their emotions. They wait for courage before they act. They wait for confidence before they speak. They wait for certainty before they move. And so they wait forever because those feelings do not arrive on their own. They are prisoners of their internal state, and their internal state is largely shaped by circumstances beyond their control. Sovereign people, on the other hand, are controlled by what they decide. Their emotions are acknowledged but not obeyed. Their feelings are noted but not followed. They have established a hierarchy within themselves where decision-making authority rests with their strategic mind, not their reactive emotions. This is not suppression, this is structure. This is the establishment of internal governance where your highest self makes the calls, not your most frightened self. Now let us address the long game, because this is where most people lose the plot entirely. Eliminating fear permanently, or more accurately, eliminating fear's control over you, is not a single act. It is not one breakthrough moment, one powerful decision, one transformative experience that solves the problem forever. It is a compounding process. It is the accumulation of thousands of small choices that either strengthen fear's grip on you or systematically weaken it. Every decision you make, every single one, either strengthens fear or weakens it. There is no neutral ground. Every time you choose comfort over growth, every time you select the familiar over the necessary, every time you prioritize feeling good over getting better, you feed the system that keeps you small. You reinforce the neural pathways that associate safety with stagnation. You teach your nervous system that discomfort is to be avoided at all costs, and in doing so, you shrink your operational range. Every time you choose action over hesitation, every time you move toward the thing that intimidates you, every time you do what you said you would do despite not feeling like it, you dismantle the architecture of limitation. You prove to your system that discomfort is survivable, that fear is not a reliable predictor of danger, that you are capable of functioning effectively even when you do not feel optimal. This is not dramatic. It is not mystical. It is mechanical. You are reconditioning your nervous system through repetition, through the establishment of new patterns that override old programming. And the nervous system, for all its complexity, is remarkably simple in one regard. It learns from patterns. It adapts to what you consistently expose it to. It becomes efficient at whatever you practice. So you must establish new patterns, new defaults, new automatic responses. Daily acts of defiance against your own resistance. Not grand gestures that make for good stories. Not massive leaps that look impressive from the outside. Small, consistent moves that compound over time. The difficult conversation you have been postponing. The uncomfortable email you need to send. The project you have been avoiding because it exposes you to judgment. The phone call that makes your stomach tight. The decision that has no comfortable option. Each one is a brick removed from the wall fear built around you. Each one is a small expansion of your capacity. And these small expansions, when accumulated over weeks and months and years, create a completely different operating system. They create a version of you that fear cannot control because you have systematically demonstrated, through repeated action, that fear's warnings are not commands you must obey. And here is the part that separates the strategic from the foolish, the tactician from the reckless amateur. You do not expose yourself recklessly. You do not take stupid risks to prove a point to yourself or anyone else. You do not confuse courage with carelessness. The Machiavellian, the true strategist, is calculated in his approach. He chooses battles that advance his position. He selects challenges that serve his larger objectives. He does not fight for the sake of fighting. He does not seek discomfort for its own sake. He fights to win. He engages with difficulty because it moves him toward his goals, not because he is trying to demonstrate fearlessness. So when you confront fear, you do it with purpose. You do it with intention. You do not jump into chaos and hope for the best. You step into controlled discomfort. You stretch the edge of your capacity, but you do not shred it. You apply pressure, but not so much that you break. Because the goal is not to break yourself in some misguided attempt at rapid transformation. The goal is to expand your capacity. And capacity grows through incremental pressure, through progressive overload, not through reckless abandon. This is the difference between the person who grows stronger and the person who simply burns out while calling it growth. Let me also address the myth of confidence, because this misunderstanding keeps people trapped in waiting mode indefinitely. People think confidence is a feeling. They believe it is an emotional state that precedes action, something you must possess before you can move forward. It is not. Confidence is not a feeling you wait for. Confidence is a reputation you build with yourself. It is the accumulated evidence of your own reliability. Every time you say you will do something and you do it, you deposit into that account. Every time you make a commitment and follow through, regardless of how you feel, you prove to yourself that you are reliable. You demonstrate that your word means something, even when the only person holding you accountable is you. And that internal reliability, that growing body of evidence that you are someone who acts, is what eliminates fear's control. Because you know not hope, not wish, not believe, you know that you will act when it matters. This is not arrogance. This is not blind self-assurance. This is evidence. You have a track record, you have data. You have a history of following through that your nervous system cannot argue with. And that track record becomes your foundation. It becomes the bedrock upon which you stand when fear tries to convince you that you are not capable, that you are not ready, that you should wait. You can point to the evidence and say, no, I have done difficult things before, I have acted despite fear before, I have delivered when it mattered before, and I will do so again. So stop waiting to feel confident. Stop postponing action until you feel ready, until the fear subsides, until you feel certain. Start building evidence instead. Act, deliver, repeat. Create a pattern of reliability that your own nervous system cannot deny. And watch as fear loses its grip, not because the sensation disappears, but because you are no longer someone who might act if conditions are perfect. You are someone who does act, regardless of conditions. You are someone with a proven track record of performance under discomfort. And that identity, that evidence-based self-concept, is what makes you truly dangerous in the best possible sense. Here is another truth that changes everything once you understand it. Fear thrives in isolation. When you are alone with your thoughts, when you are sitting still and ruminating, when you are in your head with nothing else competing for your attention, fear can spin any narrative it wants. It can build elaborate scenarios of everything that could go wrong. It can replay past failures and project them into your future. It can magnify risks and minimize your capabilities. It operates like a parasite that grows in stillness. But when you are in motion, when you are engaged in meaningful work, when you are executing on your objectives, fear has no room to operate. It cannot sustain itself. When your attention is directed outward, when your mind is occupied with problem solving, when your body is engaged in productive action. This is why action is the ultimate antidote to fear. Not because it makes you feel better, though it often does. Not because it eliminates the sensation of anxiety, though it frequently reduces it. Because it occupies the space fear needs to grow. Fear requires your attention. It requires your mental energy. It requires you to be focused inward, analyzing threats and rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Action redirects all of that energy outward, toward execution, toward creation, toward progress. So when anxiety creeps in, when you feel fear beginning to build its narrative, do not sit with it. Do not try to think your way through it. Do not analyze it endlessly hoping to resolve it intellectually. Move, work, train, create. Engage with something that demands your focus. Force your attention outward towards something you can control, something you can act upon, something that requires your energy and focus, because fear is an internal loop. It is a closed system that feeds on itself, that grows stronger the more attention you give it. And loops are broken by external engagement, by redirecting your focus toward action in the physical world. This is not avoidance. This is not running from your feelings or suppressing your emotions. This is dominance. This is you choosing where your attention goes rather than allowing fear to dictate your focus. And attention is the currency of your mental state. It is the resource that determines your internal experience. Spend it on what you control, on what you can influence, on what moves you forward. Not on what you fear, not on what might happen, not on scenarios you cannot influence. Now let us talk about the people around you, because they matter far more than you think, far more than most people are willing to admit. If you are surrounded by people who validate your fear, who encourage caution at every turn, who celebrate comfort and stability above all else, you will stay small. Not because you are weak, not because you lack potential, because environment shapes behavior more powerfully than willpower ever could. The Machiavellian, the strategic operator, understands this principle at a deep level. He curates his environment with the same care that a gardener curates soil conditions. He surrounds himself with people who operate at a higher level than his current state, not to impress them, not to gain their approval, to absorb their standards, to normalize excellence, because standards are contagious. Behavior is contagious. If everyone around you hesitates, if your circle is filled with people who overthink and underact, hesitation becomes normal. It becomes the default. It becomes what you do without thinking. If everyone around you acts, if your environment is populated by people who move decisively despite discomfort, action becomes normal. It becomes your baseline. It becomes what you expect from yourself, because it is what you see modeled. Constantly, so assess your circle with brutal honesty. Are they expanding you or containing you? Are they challenging your excuses or reinforcing them? Are they holding you to a higher standard or validating your limitations? When you express fear, do they help you move through it, or do they give you permission to stay stuck? This is not about being cold. This is not about abandoning people who care about you. This is about being strategic with one of the most powerful forces that shapes your behavior. You cannot become powerful in an environment that rewards weakness. You cannot develop into a sovereign operator while surrounded by people who celebrate victimhood. You cannot build the discipline to override fear while immersed in a culture that treats comfort as the highest value. Your environment will either support your transformation or sabotage it. There is no neutral ground. So choose it deliberately, adjust it strategically, and recognize that who you surround yourself with is one of the most consequential decisions you will make. And here is the final piece, the distinction that brings all of this together. The elimination of fear, or more precisely, the elimination of fear's control over you, is not about becoming emotionless. It is not about turning yourself into some cold, unfeeling machine that experiences nothing. It is about becoming selectively responsive. It is about developing the precision to distinguish between useful signals and irrelevant noise. You do not ignore all fear. You ignore irrelevant fear. If you are about to step into traffic, fear is useful. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it is designed to do, alerting you to genuine danger. If you are about to have a difficult conversation, fear is noise. It is your system confusing discomfort with danger, treating social risk as though it were physical threat. The difference is threat versus discomfort. Threat is something that can genuinely harm you. Discomfort is something that simply feels bad but serves your growth. And you must become precise, surgically precise, in distinguishing between the two. This precision is what makes you dangerous in the most powerful sense. Not because you are reckless, not because you ignore all warning signs, because you are clear. You know when to move and when to wait. You know when to listen to your instincts and when to override them. You know when fear is giving you valuable information and when it is simply trying to keep you comfortable. And that clarity, that surgical awareness, that ability to separate signal from noise, is what separates the tactician from the fool. The fool either ignores all fear and acts recklessly, or obeys all fear and never acts at all. The tactician evaluates, distinguishes, and responds appropriately. He moves forward despite discomfort while respecting genuine danger. And that discernment, that precision, is what creates sustainable power. So here is your path forward, your operational manual for overriding fear's control. Stop treating fear as a problem to solve, as though. The goal is to eliminate the sensation entirely. Treat it as a system to override, as a pattern to interrupt, as a signal to evaluate rather than obey. Build disciplines that make you predictable to yourself, that create reliability in your own eyes, that establish you as someone who follows through regardless of emotional weather. Engage in daily acts that expand your tolerance for discomfort, small consistent moves that stretch your capacity without breaking you. Rewrite your internal dialogue with precision and force, challenging the narratives fear spins, questioning the assumptions it makes, refusing to accept its catastrophic predictions as fact. Surround yourself with people who operate without excuses, who model the standards you are trying to internalize, who normalize action rather than hesitation. And most importantly, above all else, act, not when you feel ready. Not when the fear subsides, not when conditions are perfect. Act because the strategy demands it. Act because your objectives are non-negotiable. Act because you have decided that your potential matters more than your comfort. Act because you are building a reputation with yourself as someone who delivers. This is not a motivational speech designed to make you feel good for a few hours. This is a manual, a systematic approach to reconditioning your relationship with fear. And if you follow it, if you implement these principles consistently over time, fear will not disappear. The sensation will still arise, but it will become irrelevant. It will lose its authority. It will become background noise that you acknowledge and then move past. And irrelevance is the only defeat that matters. When fear can still speak but you no longer listen, when it can still show up but it cannot stop you, you have won the only victory that counts. You were not born to be ruled by your nervous system. You were born to rule, and ruling requires you to master the only territory that truly matters, the one between your ears. Everything else is downstream. Your relationships, your income, your influence, all of it flows from the quality of your internal command. So take command, not tomorrow, not when you are ready, now, because the world does not wait for you to feel comfortable. It rewards those who move, and movement, relentless and calculated, is the only language power understands. Fear will whisper, let it, you will act anyway. And in that defiance, in that cold, strategic defiance, you will find something better than fearlessness. You will find sovereignty, and sovereignty, once claimed, is never given back.